Thanks for joining us on another episode of Lincoln to Local. This week, we caught up with Steve Thompson on a couple of familiar bills over at the state capitol, some unfortunate news from the Oklahoma Supreme Court, and some of the policy implications about recent wildfires in western Oklahoma and the Texas Panhandle. All right, Steve, we are wrapping up the fifth week of the 2024 legislative session, and so far it seems like our focus is still on a couple of familiar bills that we've talked about before. One of those is the poultry bill that we've been dealing with. Can you kind of give us an update on where that is?
Yeah, it's hard to believe that we're already into March, and things are progressing very fast, but as fast as they're going, it does feel like we're spending a lot of time on the same set of core issues, and really the top of our list of proactive legislation was the poultry grower protection bill that we've talked about a few times, and it is passed out of the House committee and the House floor, and is set to be heard in a Senate committee in a couple of weeks. But we've had to work on that quite a bit during this intermediate period because there's been a lot of opponents emerge, largely centered around Tulsa, northeastern Oklahoma, some environmental activist groups and others that I think are challenging it on basis that aren't factual. And so we've really had to work hard about working with the senators and other stakeholders in the Capitol to explain what it actually does and what it doesn't do, to make sure they understand that the goal of that is to incentivize producers to stay in compliance with the law, to do things the right way. And if they do that, then they're afforded some liability protections, and that if they aren't doing it the right way, then they're still open to all types of penalties, as it should be. We want our folks doing it the right way. But some of the allegations that have come from a number of their groups were a pretty bad stretch of the truth, if not outright not factual. Right. So we've been trying to just help educate people about that and make sure they understand that what we want as Oklahoma Farm Bureau and our partners in agriculture on behalf of the growers and everybody in that business is for them to continue to grow and make money and employ folks and send their kids to school and bring them back for the next generation. And lawsuits that we've seen in the past are very counterproductive to the industry and to the future of the state. And so we want it to be done in the right manner just as much as anybody else. And so we're optimistic about how that's going to end up, but it's probably truly going to take all of us working together to stand up for what's right in that area.
Definitely. It seems like a lot of the media coverage on that bill in particular are kind of shining light on or displaying it as, this is just protecting all poultry growers and no matter what they're doing. But that's really not the case, right? It's just for those that are in compliance with those plans. Yeah,
it's been interesting, some of the questions and things that we've seen float around out there and allegations about that. And I suppose that a lot of folks are confused by some of the legal aspects of things, and that's part of our job is to sort through those things. But no, this bill is to make sure that people do it the right way, and once they do it the right way, then you have some protections under the law as it should be. But if you're doing it the wrong way, the Department of Ag can still take the action needed to correct that, and then if you expose yourself to liability through your wrongdoing, you're still can be taken to court anytime if you're doing something the wrong way. This way, it just protects those that are doing it the right way.
That makes sense. What are the next steps for this bill? Is it headed to the Senate now, or where are we at with that?
It has not been assigned to a Senate committee yet. We expect that's likely to be the Senate Agriculture Committee, and so it would probably be in about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, that it would be eligible to be heard in the Senate committee. And so that's the next time that it'll be up for a consideration. And so we're very familiar with the members of that committee, and so we'll continue to visit with those folks and make sure that they have the full story.
Great. So another one I know we've been focusing on is the groundwater bills, the metering, and a couple of different bills going on with that. Will you give us an update on those?
Yeah, that's clearly been the other issue that's taken up so much of everyone's time, and rightfully so, because water is such an important issue all around the state, but it's also incredibly complicated all across the state. And so as most folks know, the year started with a lot of those water bills. We're down to really two main bills, and one of those has seen a lot of negotiation. regulations. The primary author is Senator Brent Howard of that bill, and it's poised to run probably next week on the Senate floor. But I think we're on probably the fourth or fifth draft of that bill, and it's currently being circulated amongst stakeholders. We appreciate Senator Howard and his willingness to change some of the language where he started, because it was really scary, to be honest, on behalf of some of our folks that had their property rights put in jeopardy with that language. But as it turns out, I think some folks who were on opposite sides of the table to start this discussion are in agreement over so many things relative to making sure that the current law is enforced and that we do a better job at the Water Resources Board of addressing the issues that exist today and finding out what the data is, finding out how much water individual irrigators are using, and is it within the current legal framework. So before we take away somebody's property right, we need to see if they're adhering to that to begin with. And so that's really the discussion, is how do you create a structure to measure the water, the groundwater that's being used. How does the state agency, in this case the Water Resources Board, how do they monitor that and enforce that? And currently they really don't have much of an enforcement staff. So kind of the secondary issue is an appropriations one. Is there going to be money available in the state budget to increase a presence of staff so that they can actually keep an eye on these things and make sure that folks are in compliance? And then how does that work? And I think where the draft is today is a very stair-stepped approach. It would drag out. I think it's kind of an 8-year plan where we start in the first 2 years, maybe looking at that specific Southwest Oklahoma water basin, groundwater basin, where this discussion originally arose, and then work our way around the state as the Water Resources Board has funds available to implement this metering and monitoring and enforcement. And so this is going to be a long discussion. Even if this bill does work out, we're probably going to be back in the legislature fine-tuning it, if not every year, then at least every other year, probably for the next couple of decades. But I feel like it's heading in the right direction, and right now everybody's evaluating, like I said, probably our fifth draft of that. And so it could still change again. We still have a lot of time left in session, but I think we will see another vote on that in the Senate next week.
Great. And this is a bill or a set of bills that it doesn't necessarily affect residential water use. Is that correct? It's just for larger scale irrigation type areas? That's right. And that's a great question to point out, because some of the original language did not differentiate, and it was a little bit confusing. It was never intended to cover what they call domestic wells. It'd be more household, or if you're watering your livestock, that you do not need a permit from the Water Resources Board for that, and that's not what's covered under this legislation. But to avoid any confusion with that, I think that language has been clarified just to make sure these are only permitted wells that are required to have a permit through the Water Resources Board, industrial and irrigation mainly. Those are the larger water users, and so that's really all that's being affected by this change. And so, and in fact, I think one of the things that Senator Howard put in there is to clarify that even if it's not at your household, but if it is a piece of property you own down the road where you're just watering livestock, that could have been interpreted to be something that needed a permit, and that's going to be clarified. So it actually may insulate some of our livestock folks out there from having to get caught up in some of this increased regulation in the future. So there are things like that we're going to have to look at all throughout the process. But that's been a question on everybody's mind, and it's strictly trying to shoot at the permitted wells around the state. Gotcha. Yeah, that's good to know. I know it's a work in progress. So this week we got some interesting news from the Oklahoma Supreme Court on the minimum wage challenge. Will you give our members kind of a status update on where that's at? Yeah, that was really unfortunate and honestly a little bit surprising. Oklahoma Farm Bureau and our legal foundation had participated alongside the State Chamber of Oklahoma in a legal challenge before the Supreme Court on the proposed initiative petition to increase the Oklahoma minimum wage. It would also have eliminated a number of exemptions that impacted agriculture producers and a lot of our operations, and would have tied the new number to a federal statistic that is set by the Federal Department of Labor based upon urban cost of living index, which violated some constitutional provisions that there had been a precedent set by this Oklahoma Supreme Court on this issue before, saying you could not do that. So we were
We were fairly certain that the court would set this aside based upon violation of that precedent, but they had dismissed our challenge in total and ruled that the petitioners could move forward into the signature gathering phase. So that's really what comes next, is that they have kind of a tight timeline between now, here we sit in early March, to get something on the November ballot, because they have to get the 115 some odd thousand signatures and have that back to the Secretary of State within a few months. But what we've seen with these issues before is when you have a well-funded out-of-state group that comes in, they bring in hired professionals to gather the signatures, and they're able to go into urban areas and get enough. So we think that it might be tight, but we do believe that they're likely to get those signatures and that it is likely to be on the November ballot.
And what does, say the minimum wage does go up as this petition desires, how does that affect agriculture in the long run?
So most of our folks would realize that labor is a huge challenge in agriculture and truly across all sectors today. But one of the things that we're most concerned about is if this drives up the cost of employees, the bottom line for our producers only continues to grow thinner. And even if you are currently employing somebody for, say, $20 an hour, which is well over the minimum wage, if this raises the floor for everybody up to $15 and then perpetually goes up from there, the $20 you are currently paying a hired hand, say, has less value than it did before. And so that those employees are probably going to have their salary increased as well. And so the trickle up effect that this would cause could really eat into the profit margin of folks who are just struggling to find employees as it is. And if those that they can find, the cost increases, and the way the proposal is structured, it would really never stop. It would go up every year in the future, and we don't know where that would land. And so the uncertainty of that when you're trying to budget for profit and loss is something that really causes our folks a lot of concern.
Definitely, because it sounds like this price index that we're looking at, or they're looking at tying it to, is just really not indicative of Oklahoma's economy and cost of living. Is that correct?
We're very concerned about that. It's a measurement from a handful of cities all across the United States, but they are literally places like Boston and San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago. I'm not sure that anything other than maybe Oklahoma City or Tulsa are impacted by that in Oklahoma. And so there can be a lot of differences in the economy in rural Oklahoma as compared to the urban areas. And so we are worried that would be out of touch with the real cost of living and the cost of employment. And we're mostly a free marketplace type organization, and we're concerned that adding another layer of government intervention in forcing certain salary and wage limits could really distort the way the market works and cause a lot of problems.
Definitely. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Definitely some disappointing news this week. Another thing that we've had going on over the last week or so is some wildfires out in western Oklahoma and in the Texas panhandle. Can you kind of give us an update on where we are with things like that and producer aid and relief?
Yeah, that's been a tremendous problem that we hate to see any time of year, but this time of year is particularly devastating. And our Oklahoma Farm Bureau Foundation and the Federation and the insurance side have all contributed to those relief efforts. And from the policy standpoint, we've gotten a number of calls from our members throughout the state, as well as our friends at American Farm Bureau Federation and Texas Farm Bureau, about how some of the emergency indemnity payments would work for folks who had lost cattle in that. And we know that there's been several thousand cattle lost in Oklahoma, and I think quite a bit more in Texas. And so we've got a little working group put together that has been trying to get some answers from USDA. We've had a couple of calls this week, and I think we're going to have some more next week to try to answer some questions about how do we provide the documentation required, how do they handle bred cattle, and what the payment rates will be and what market they were going to be based upon. And I know that cattle market is really high right now, and so if that number is based upon last year's market, as we've been told, and if that's at a 75% of the value we're really going to see some producers that have lost even more than usual when it comes to this disaster because of how much they had invested in those cattle. And so we're going to try to answer all those questions the best we can and maybe push USDA to provide those answers in a more timely manner because as folks are dealing with the cleanup of this, the documentation gets harder and harder to do. And if there's not clear answers while they're immediately responding, it provides some problems down the road. So we're working with our partners to try to get answers to those very important questions.
Definitely. I know it's just such a heartbreaking issue, but I know your team will stay on top of it. Well, thank you so much, Steve.